The crystal spires of Keth Prime burned against the purple sky. Ambassador Velthara pressed her six-fingered hand against the observation deck window and watched her world die. The Vraktar ships hung in orbit like black daggers, their weapons turning her people's beautiful cities into molten glass. "How many more cities?" she asked without turning around. High Council Leader Mordane's voice cracked as he answered. 17 fell today. The northern continent is gone. They're not taking prisoners, Velthara. They're not even taking slaves. They just destroy everything. Velthara closed her large, dark eyes. The Kethmori had always been a peaceful people. Their greatest achievement was art, not war. Their ships carried musicians and poets, not soldiers. When the Vraktar horde first appeared at the edge of their system, they had tried to negotiate. They offered trade, knowledge, even tribute. The Vraktar response was to laugh and open fire. "What about the others?" she asked. "The Alteran Federation? The Zenthek Empire?" Mordane's scaled hand shook as he held the communication pad. "The Alterans say they cannot risk war with the Vraktar. The Zentheks claim they are busy with internal matters. The Quarians—" He paused. "The Quarians say it would be logistically impossible to help us." Velthara turned from the window. Her people were dying, and the galaxy's great civilizations were too afraid or too busy to care. "What about the smaller worlds, anyone?" "The same answers, all of them. Fear or indifference." Mordane set down the pad with trembling hands. "We are alone." Outside, another flash lit the sky as orbital bombardment turned the art district into slag. Velthara had grown up in those galleries. Her daughter had played in those gardens. Now they were nothing but cooling metal and ash. "There is one option," Mordane said quietly. "What option? We've contacted everyone in the known galaxy." "Not everyone." The old counselor pulled up a star chart. "There are worlds we haven't contacted. Worlds marked as too dangerous or primitive." Velthara studied the map. Most of the unexplored regions were marked in red: danger zones, stellar anomalies, or worlds with hostile environments. But one caught her attention. A small blue-green planet in the outer rim marked with warnings she had never seen before. "What is this world?" she asked, pointing at it. Mordane enlarged the display. The warnings made her skin crawl. Hazard class extreme. Avoid at all costs. Hostile environment. Multiple extinction events. Dangerous native life forms. Planetary warfare detected. They're fighting wars on their own planet? According to the automated surveys, they never stop fighting. The species there battles everything. Their environment, their weather, each other. Most civilizations classify it as a death world. Velthara stared at the blue dot on the screen. A world of endless war and death. What kind of creatures could survive such a place? What kind of beings would it create? "You want to ask savages for help?" "I want to ask survivors for help." Mordane's voice was steady now. "Look at the data. This species has endured ice ages, asteroid impacts, volcanic winters, and global floods. They've survived plague, famine, and wars that make our current situation look like a minor dispute. If anyone in the galaxy knows how to fight when everything seems hopeless, it would be them." Another explosion shook the building. Through the window, Velthara could see Vraktar ground forces moving through the lower city. The enemy soldiers were twice the size of any Kethmori, with armored skin and weapons that could punch through solid stone. Her people ran from them like frightened children. "What are they called, these Deathworld dwellers?" Mordane checked the file. "According to the old exploration records, they call themselves humans." The building shook again, harder this time. Emergency lights bathed the council chamber in red. In the distance, Velthara could hear the sound of her people screaming. "Do it," she said. "Velthara, we don't know anything about them. They might be as bad as the Vraktar. They might demand tribute we cannot afford. They might not even have space travel. Look around, Mordane. What do we have to lose?" The old counselor was quiet for a long moment. Outside, the screaming grew louder. Finally, he nodded and activated the emergency broadcast system. "This is Ambassador Velthara of the Kethmori Republic," she said into the transmitter. Her voice would carry across the galaxy, reaching every world with the technology to receive it. "We are under attack. Our people are dying. We have tried diplomacy. We have offered everything we possess, and still they come. The great powers of the galaxy have abandoned us to our fate." She paused, watching another section of the city burn. "To anyone who receives this message, to any species brave enough or desperate enough to answer, we offer everything we have. All our knowledge, all our resources, all our gratitude. We ask not for conquest or glory, but for survival. Help us and we will be forever in your debt. Mordain cut the transmission and looked at her sadly. Now we wait. How long? If anyone is coming, they would need to receive the signal, decode our language, make a decision, and travel here. Days at minimum, more likely weeks. Velthara nodded and walked back to the window. She could see Vraktar ships landing in the city center. They would have hours, not days. The transmission was pointless. A final scream into the void before extinction. The communication console beeped. Both Kethmori froze. It was impossible. The signal had just been sent. No one could have received and responded so quickly. Mordain's hands shook as he activated the receiver. The voice that came through was unlike anything they had ever heard. It was flat, emotionless, speaking in their language but with an accent that suggested the speaker had learned it very recently. Coordinates received. En route, that was all. No questions about payment. No demands for tribute. No negotiation or diplomacy. Just acknowledgement and action. Where did that come from? Velthara whispered. Mordain checked the signal trace. His large eyes went wide. The Deathworld. The humans. But that's impossible. The signal only just reached them. Even if they responded immediately, how could they decode our language so fast? How could they? I don't know. Mordain stared at the console. But they're coming. Outside, the Vraktar continued their methodical destruction of everything the Kethmori had built. But for the first time in days, Ambassador Velthara felt something other than despair. She felt hope. Strange, terrifying hope in the form of unknown warriors from a world where nothing was supposed to survive. In the depths of space, something was moving toward them. Something from a place where war was not an occasional horror but a way of life. The Deathworld had answered their call. General Han Wujin stood in the command center deep beneath the Rockies, staring at the alien transmission with his one good eye. The other eye had been lost during the Martian rebellion, along with his left arm up to the elbow. The mechanical replacement was more efficient than flesh, but it reminded him daily that humans paid a price for everything they achieved. "Play it again," he ordered. The desperate voice of the alien ambassador filled the room once more. Around the table, Earth's military leadership listened with the expression of people who had heard similar pleas before. Admiral Park Dasam tapped her fingers against the metal table, a nervous habit from her days commanding patrol ships in the asteroid belt. Colonel Kim Taeho's cybernetic eye whirred softly as it recorded every detail for analysis. "Well?" Han asked when the message finished. "It's legitimate," Colonel Kim said. His artificial eye could detect things human eyes couldn't. "The distress is real. Population centers are being systematically destroyed. Estimated civilian casualties in the millions." Admiral Park pulled up a holographic display of the target system. "It's deep in uncharted space. No supply lines, no backup, no extraction plan if things go wrong. We'd be completely on our own." "How many enemy ships?" Han asked. "Intelligence estimates between 800 and 1,200 Vraktar vessels. Their individual ships are larger than ours with superior firepower." General Han nodded slowly. Around him, his officers waited for his decision. These weren't politicians or peacekeepers. They were survivors of humanity's endless conflicts. The water wars that had killed 3 billion. The Siberian campaign where soldiers fought in temperatures that could freeze blood in their veins. The Australian wasteland conflicts where the enemy was the planet itself as much as other humans. "Thoughts?" Han asked. Colonel Kim spoke first. "Standard genocidal raiders. They hit civilian targets first to break morale, then move in for the cleanup. Effective against species that haven't seen real warfare. Which explains why the galaxy's other powers won't help," Admiral Park added. "They're used to civilized warfare. Polite battles with rules and surrender options. This isn't that kind of fight." Han studied the tactical display. 1,200 enemy ships versus whatever Earth could scramble on short notice. Any sane military commander would call it impossible. Han had been in the military for 30 years and sanity had never been a requirement. "Commander Song, what can we deploy?" Commander Song Youngie was the youngest person at the table, but her record spoke for itself. She had fought in the polar campaigns where the ice itself was a weapon, and in the deep ocean wars where humans learned to battle in crushing darkness. Her voice was calm as she read from her tablet. "Third Fleet is currently on exercises near Titan. 200 combat vessels, fully equipped. The Sol is flagship. 7th Marine Division is aboard, along with the usual support elements. 200 ships against 1,200, Admiral Park mused. I've seen worse odds. When? Colonel Kim asked. Europa. We had 50 ships against 300 rebel platforms. She smiled grimly. Of course, we knew the terrain there. General Han considered the numbers. By any reasonable calculation, they were being asked to commit suicide. But reasonable calculations had never stopped humans before. When the Ice Age came, they hadn't given up. They had learned to make fire. When the supervolcanoes erupted, they hadn't fled. They had dug deeper. When the floods came, they had built boats. When other humans made war, they had made better war. There's something else, Colonel Kim said quietly. We intercepted communications from the other galactic powers. They're not just refusing to help. They're actively discouraging anyone from getting involved. Why? Unknown. But the patterns suggest they're afraid of something. Not just the Vraktar, something else. Han leaned back in his chair. His mechanical arm clicked softly as internal servos adjusted. They're afraid of us. The room fell silent. It made sense in a way. Humanity had been monitoring galactic communications for decades, learning languages and studying cultures from the shadows. They knew about the great civilizations, the trading empires, the peaceful federations. But none of those civilizations knew about Earth until now. They think we're savages, Admiral Park said. They're right, Han replied. We are savages. Useful savages. He stood and walked to the display showing the alien star system. Somewhere out there, a peaceful species was dying because the galaxy's civilized powers were too afraid or too comfortable to help. It was a familiar story. Throughout human history, someone had always been willing to look the other way while innocents suffered. Orders, sir? Commander Song asked. Han turned to face his officers. These people had survived everything Earth could throw at them. They had fought in deserts where the sand could strip flesh from bone, in jungles where every plant was poisonous, in cities where the buildings themselves had been turned into weapons. They were products of a world that had never known peace. Signal Third Fleet. Emergency deployment. Admiral Park, you have overall command. Colonel Kim, take your special operations teams. Commander Song, prepare for extended operations with no resupply. Rules of engagement? Admiral Park asked. Han's smile was not pleasant. We're responding to a distress call. Anyone who interferes with rescue operations is a hostile target, including the Vraktar, especially the Vraktar. The officers began filing out to prepare their units. Colonel Kim paused at the door. Sir, what about the political situation? This will be humanity's first official contact with galactic civilization. General Han looked at the display one more time. Somewhere in that distant system, people were dying while their neighbors watched and did nothing. It was the oldest story in the universe, and humans had always been on the wrong side of it. The weak side. The side that got abandoned when help was needed most. Let them know what kind of neighbors they've had all along, he said. Within 6 hours, Third Fleet was moving. Admiral Park stood on the bridge of the UES Sol, watching Earth shrink behind them. Around her, 200 of humanity's finest warships accelerated toward interstellar space. They carried soldiers who had learned to fight in Earth's hurricanes, pilots who had trained in Venus's acid storms, engineers who could rebuild cities while under fire. ETA to target system? She asked. 18 hours at maximum hyperspace velocity, her navigation officer replied. Admiral Park nodded. 18 hours to cross half the galaxy. By the time they arrived, the aliens who had called for help might already be extinct. But that wouldn't stop the fleet. Humans had a habit of finishing what they started, even when they started too late. Send a message to the alien survivors, she ordered. Tell them help is coming. What if they're all dead by the time we arrive? Admiral Park's expression hardened. Then we make sure the people who killed them understand why that was a mistake. The fleet entered hyperspace, carrying with it the concentrated fury of a species that had never known a day without conflict. Behind them, Earth continued its slow rotation, scarred by wars, marked by disasters, home to the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy. Humans were coming, and they were bringing 4 billion years of survival experience with them. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Keth-Mori system, like wolves emerging from winter fog. Admiral Park Dasam studied the tactical display with the calm expression of someone who had seen worse situations before breakfast. Analysis, she ordered. Commander Choi. Minji's fingers flew across her console. The intelligence officer had learned 6 alien languages during the 18-hour journey. a feat that would have taken most species months to accomplish. Her brain, enhanced with neural implants earned during the Luna Wars, processed information faster than most computers. 1,200 Vraktar vessels confirmed. They've established a blockade around the inhabited worlds. Orbital bombardment is ongoing. She paused, her enhanced vision zooming in on the planet's surface. Cities are burning, but I'm detecting survivor clusters. The aliens who called us are still alive. For now, muttered Captain Lee Hyunwoo from his position at the tactical station. The commander of the UES Seoul had fought in more campaigns than most people could remember. His ship bore scars from the Titan Massacre, the Europa Rebellion, and a dozen other conflicts that never made it into the history books. Admiral Park studied the enemy formation. The Vraktar ships were massive, each one the size of a human city. They moved in loose groups, confident in their overwhelming superiority. Their formation showed all the discipline of a pack of wild animals, effective for terrorizing civilians, useless against real soldiers. What do we know about the enemy? She asked. Commander Choi pulled up the intelligence files. Vraktar Horde, nomadic raiders. They travel from system to system, destroying everything they can't use. No permanent settlements, no infrastructure, no supply chains. They carry everything they need with them. Weaknesses? Their strength. They're used to enemies who break and run at the first sign of resistance. They've never faced prolonged opposition. Admiral Park nodded. It was a familiar pattern. Throughout human history, successful raiders had always been defeated the same way. By people who refused to be intimidated, and who were willing to pay the price for victory. Communications, she ordered. Open a channel to both the aliens who called us and the Vraktar fleet. Both at once, ma'am? Both at once, the channel opened. On one side of the split screen appeared Ambassador Velthara, her alien features twisted with desperate hope. On the other side was something that looked like a nightmare given form, the Vraktar War Alpha Grexthor. The creature was twice the size of a human with armored skin and teeth designed for tearing flesh. This is Admiral Park Dasam of the Terran Fleet, she said calmly. We received your distress call. Ambassador Velthara's large eyes filled with tears. You came. You actually came. War Alpha Grexthor's response was a laugh that sounded like grinding metal. More prey comes to feed us. How generous. Admiral Park's expression didn't change. She had heard similar threats from human warlords, alien rebels, and once from a rogue AI that thought it could intimidate humanity into surrender. They were all dead now. To the Kethmori, she said, we're here. Stay out of our way. To the Vraktar, she continued, her voice flat as winter ice. You have 10 minutes to leave this system. The reaction was immediate. Ambassador Velthara gasped in shock. War Alpha Grexthor's laughter grew louder. 10 minutes? The Vraktar leader roared. You arrive with 200 tiny ships and threaten us. We are 1,200 strong. We have conquered 1,000 worlds. 9 minutes, 30 seconds, Admiral Park replied, checking her chronometer. Commander Choi was running continuous scans of the enemy fleet. What she saw confirmed her suspicions about typical raider psychology. The Vraktar ships were spreading out, positioning themselves to surround the human fleet. It was an intimidation tactic that probably worked well against civilized species. Admiral, Captain Lee said quietly, their weapons are powered up. They're preparing to attack. Of course they are. Admiral Park opened a fleet-wide channel. All ships, this is Admiral Park. Rules of engagement are simple. They want to fight, we give them a fight. They want to run, we let them run. They want to surrender, we accept. Any questions? The response came from Captain Shin Bora, commander of the stealth ship UES Busan. Her voice carried the confidence of someone who had fought pirates in the asteroid belt. Where one mistake meant death in the cold vacuum of space, no questions, Admiral. Just a request, go ahead. Can I have the big one? Admiral Park almost smiled. Captain Shin had volunteered for every dangerous mission since joining the fleet. She was the kind of person who saw a problem and immediately started thinking of ways to solve it, usually involving explosives. The command ship is yours, Captain. Try not to enjoy yourself too much. War Alpha Grexthor was still issuing threats when the 10 minutes expired. He was in the middle of describing what he would do to the human prisoners when Admiral Park cut him off. Time's up, she said simply. The UES Busan had been moving during the entire conversation, invisible to Vraktar sensors and ignored by enemies who thought humans were just another victim species. Captain Shin had positioned her ship perfectly, directly beneath the massive Raktar command vessel. The antimatter charge she detonated was small by human standards, roughly equivalent to a tactical nuclear weapon. It punched through the command ships, armor like a needle through paper, and turned the entire vessel into a brief new star. War Alpha Grexthor's threats ended in a flash of brilliant light. The silence that followed was deafening. For a moment, neither the Kethmori nor the remaining Vraktar seemed to understand what had just happened. Then the reality sank in. The humans had just eliminated the enemy's command ship as casually as swatting a fly. "All ships," Admiral Park ordered, "advance." The human fleet moved forward with the mechanical precision of a machine designed for one purpose. These weren't glory-seeking warriors or terrified defenders. They were professionals, approaching their job with the same methodical efficiency they brought to everything else. Master Sergeant Kang Dae-young, commanding the Marine contingent aboard the Seoul, watched the tactical display with satisfaction. He had fought on 20 different worlds in every environment from Arctic tundra to molten lava fields. This looked like it was going to be a straightforward operation. "How long until we reach optimal combat range?" he asked. 3 minutes, Captain Lee replied. Commander Choi was monitoring Vraktar communications, her enhanced hearing picking up panicked conversations across the enemy fleet. "They're confused," she reported. "They've never seen tactics like this. Some ships are trying to retreat. Others are demanding immediate attack. Typical raiders," Admiral Park observed. "No real command structure once you remove the leader." "What about the civilians?" "Survivor clusters are holding position. They're staying away from the combat zone." "Good. Signal the fleet. Weapons free." The human ships opened fire at maximum range, their weapons designed for precision rather than intimidation. Unlike the massive energy cannons favored by most species, human weapons were small, fast, and numerous. They struck like a swarm of angry wasps, each hit precisely targeted to disable specific systems. The Vraktar response was immediate and predictable. They charged forward, relying on superior numbers and firepower to overwhelm their smaller opponents. It was exactly what the humans had expected them to do. What followed wasn't a battle in the traditional sense. It was a demonstration of what happened when professional soldiers met amateur raiders. The humans moved like dancers, their ships weaving through enemy fire while delivering precisely targeted attacks. Every shot had a purpose. Every maneuver served a tactical goal. Within the first hour, the Vraktar had lost 200 ships. The humans had lost none. Ambassador Velthara watched from her damaged command center in amazement. These humans fought like nothing she had ever seen. They showed no anger, no fear, no hesitation. They approached warfare like engineers solving a problem, systematically, efficiently, and with absolute confidence in their methods. "Who are they?" she whispered to herself. The answer was becoming clear with every passing minute. They were the children of a world that had never known peace, taught by 4 billion years of natural selection that only the adaptable survived. They were the products of every disaster, every war, every catastrophe that had ever struck their home. They were exactly what the galaxy needed, whether it knew it or not. Wing Commander Yoon Seo-jin pulled her fighter into a dive that would have liquefied most aliens. But her body had been conditioned by years of flying through Earth's storm systems. Her ship, the fighter everyone called Rust Bucket because it looked like it had been welded together from spare parts, screamed toward a cluster of Vraktar destroyers. "Go, squadron. Form up on me," she ordered through gritted teeth. The G-forces would have been crushing if she hadn't spent her childhood flying crop dusters through tornado seasons in Kansas. Her squadron followed her lead. 12 fighters that looked fragile compared to the massive enemy ships but moved like sharks in deep water. They had learned to fight in the asteroid belt, where a single mistake meant becoming a frozen corpse floating in space forever. "Target the sensor arrays first," Yoon commanded. "Make them deaf and blind, then we cut them apart piece by piece." The Vraktar destroyers opened fire with enough energy to level a city. The beams passed harmlessly through space where the human fighters had been a split second earlier. What the raiders hadn't expected was that humans had learned to dodge by studying their own predators. The way a bird avoids a hawk, the way a fish escapes a shark. Lieutenant Kang Soo-ho, flying off Yoon's left wing, rolled his fighter through a gap between 2 energy beams that was barely wider than his ship. "These guys shoot like they're trying to intimidate us," he called out. "All flash, no accuracy." "Stay focused," Yoon replied, but she knew what he meant. The Vraktar fought like bullies who had never met real resistance. Their weapons were designed to terrify, not to kill efficiently. It was the difference between a human gangster and a human soldier. She lined up her shot on the lead destroyer's main sensor cluster and fired. Human weapons were smaller than what most species used, but they were precise. The sensor array exploded in a shower of sparks, leaving the massive ship partially blind. Down on the planet's surface, Lieutenant Colonel Bae Jung-min was discovering that ground combat with the Vraktar was even more one-sided than the space battle. His Marines had dropped in assault pods that came down like meteorites, their heat shields glowing red as they punched through the atmosphere. The Vraktar ground forces were impressive to look at. Each warrior stood nearly 3 meters tall, with natural armor plating and weapons that could punch holes through solid stone. They had arranged themselves in defensive positions around groups of Kethmori civilians, using the innocents as human shields. Classic terrorist tactic, Sergeant Park In-ho observed, studying the enemy positions through his rifle scope. The 40-year veteran had seen every variation of asymmetric warfare during his career. They think having hostages makes them untouchable. They're about to learn different, Lieutenant Colonel Bae replied. He opened his tactical map and began issuing orders. His Marines spread out around the enemy positions, moving with the silent efficiency of people who had trained in Earth's deepest jungles and highest mountains. Major Lim Hai-wan, the battalion's combat engineer, was studying the problem from a technical perspective. She had learned her trade building and destroying fortifications during the urban pacification wars, where every building was a potential fortress and every street was a killing ground. "Sir," she called to Lieutenant Colonel Bae, "I've got a solution for the hostage situation. I'm listening. We go through the shield." What she meant became clear over the next hour. Instead of trying to fight around the civilian hostages, the humans created new routes. Major Lim's engineers used shaped charges to blow holes through solid rock, creating tunnels that led directly beneath the Vraktar positions. Combat teams moved through storm drains, subway systems, and maintenance tunnels that the raiders had never bothered to secure. The attack came from everywhere at once. Vraktar warriors who had been confident in their defensive positions suddenly found human soldiers appearing from underground, from rooftops, from inside buildings they thought were empty. The Marines moved like ghosts, striking fast and disappearing before the enemy could respond. Sergeant Park found himself face to face with a Vraktar warrior who was nearly twice his size, and armed with a weapon that could cut through tank armor. The alien roared a challenge, expecting the small human to flee in terror. Instead, Park shot him in the knee with a weapon designed for hunting Earth's most dangerous predators. The warrior collapsed and Park moved on to the next target without breaking stride. He had learned long ago that the biggest and loudest enemies were often the easiest to defeat. Up in orbit, Wing Commander Yoon was discovering that the Vraktar had one major weakness. They had never learned to fight as a team. Each ship operated independently, trying to claim individual glory rather than working together for victory. "They're breaking formation," Lieutenant Kang reported. "Half their fleet is trying to retreat, the other half is charging straight at us." "Let them come," Yoon replied. She had fought human pirates who were better organized than this. "Angel Squadron, take the runners. Ghost Squadron will handle the heroes." The Vraktar ships that chose to fight came in fast and aggressive, their weapons blazing. But aggression without discipline was just a quick way to die. The human fighters wove through their formation like needles through cloth, targeting engines, weapons, and life support systems with surgical precision. Captain Jang Kyung-ho, commanding the artillery platform UES Thunder, was having the most fun he'd had in years. His ship's main guns were designed for precision bombardment, originally built to take out specific targets on Earth's surface from orbital platforms. "Target acquired," his gunner reported. "Vraktar troop concentration, grid 77 Alpha. What's the collateral damage assessment?" "Clean shot, sir. No civilian structures within the blast radius. Fire." The kinetic projectile that struck the Vraktar position had been accelerated to nearly 30% of light speed. It hit with the force of a small nuclear weapon, but with none of the radioactive aftermath. The enemy troops simply ceased to exist, along with a perfectly circular crater 50 meters deep. Dr. No Yeon-bi was working in the field hospital that had been set up in a damaged Kethmori school. As a combat medic, she had learned to save lives while battles raged around her. Her hands moved efficiently as she treated wounded civilians, her mind calculating dosages for alien physiology, even as artillery fire lit the sky outside. "Doctor," one of her assistants called, "we've got incoming wounded from the northern sector. Human or alien?" "Both." Dr. No nodded and prepared her equipment. She would save anyone she could, enemy or ally. It was a principle humans had learned during their own wars. Hatred was temporary, but medical knowledge was forever. A Kethmori child was brought in, her small body broken by falling debris. Dr. No worked over her with the same intensity she had brought to treating human soldiers during the Martian campaigns. The child's alien biology was different, but trauma was trauma, and pain was universal. "Will she live?" the child's mother asked in broken human language. "Yes," Dr. No replied without looking up from her work. "She'll live." Outside, the battle was reaching its climax. The Vraktar, faced with an enemy that refused to be intimidated and couldn't be defeated by brute force, were making their final desperate plays. Some ships tried to ram human vessels. Others attempted to bombard the planet's surface in spite. A few tried to negotiate surrender. Admiral Park, watching from the Soul's Bridge, felt the familiar satisfaction of a job well done. The enemy was broken, the civilians were safe, and her people had performed exactly as expected. It wasn't glory or heroism. It was just another day at work for the children of Earth. "Status report," she ordered. 80% of enemy forces destroyed or disabled," Commander Choi reported. "Remaining ships are either retreating or requesting surrender terms." "And our losses?" 14 fighters damaged, 2 destroyers with minor hull breaches. "No fatalities," Admiral Park nodded. The numbers were better than she had hoped, but about what she had expected. When professionals fought amateurs, the outcome was rarely in doubt. "Signal the survivors," she ordered. "Standard terms. Surrender, disarm, and submit to judgment for war crimes. Anyone who doesn't accept can leave the system and never return." The battle was over. All that remained was the cleanup, and humans had plenty of experience with that too. The remaining Vraktar War Alpha, a massive creature called Thokvar, stood in the ruins of what had been the capital city's main plaza. Around him, the last of his warriors waited for the humans to come. They had tried to retreat, but human ships had appeared in every escape route. They had tried to hide, but human sensors found them everywhere. Now there was nowhere left to run. "They fight like demons," one of his sub-commanders growled. The warrior's armor was cracked, his weapon nearly depleted. "How can such small creatures be so dangerous?" Thokvar didn't answer. He was thinking about the battle reports, trying to understand how everything had gone so wrong so quickly. The Vraktar horde had conquered hundreds of worlds using the same tactics. Overwhelming force, brutal intimidation, and the simple fact that most species would rather surrender than fight. But these humans were different. They didn't seem to understand that they were supposed to be afraid. Sergeant Park Inho approached the plaza on foot, his rifle held casually in his hands. Behind him came a squad of Marines, but they moved without urgency. To them, this was just the final cleanup of a successful operation. Park had seen the intelligence reports on the Vraktar. They were impressive physical specimens built for intimidation and close combat. In a fair fight, any one of them could probably defeat 3 or 4 humans. Park had no intention of fighting fair. "You the boss?" he called out to Thokvar in the alien's own language. The translation software had decoded Vraktar speech patterns during the battle, and Park had always been good with languages. Thokvar stepped forward, his massive frame casting a shadow over the human soldier. "I am War Alpha Thokvar of the Crimson Fang clan. You are the leader of these humans." Park looked around at his squad and chuckled. "Me? No, I'm just a sergeant. Been one for about 20 years now. Never wanted to be anything else." The alien warrior was confused. In Vraktar culture, only leaders challenged other leaders. The idea that a common soldier would approach him directly was unthinkable. "Then send me your War Alpha," Thokvar demanded. "I challenge him to single combat. Winner takes all." "That's not really how we do things," Park replied. He was studying the alien's stance, noting the way Thokvar favored his left side. "Probably an old injury, maybe from a previous campaign. But if you want to fight someone, I guess that's me." Thokvar laughed, a sound like grinding metal. You are nothing. I have killed thousands in single combat. I am the champion of 7 worlds." "That's nice," Park said mildly. He was checking his rifle, making sure it was properly loaded. "Old habits from a lifetime of warfare. I'm a sergeant from Detroit. We done talking?" The alien's roar of rage echoed off the ruined buildings. He charged forward, his massive weapon raised high, expecting to cut the small human in half with a single blow. Park stepped to one side and shot him in the knee. Thakvar collapsed, his leg no longer able to support his weight. He looked up at the human in shock and confusion. Where was the honor? Where was the glory of single combat? You shot me, he said, his voice filled with disbelief. Yeah, well, you were trying to kill me, Park replied. He walked over and kicked the alien's weapon away. This isn't a movie, big guy. This is work. Dr. No Yunbi was still working in the field hospital when they brought Thakvar in. The massive alien warrior was restrained with enough chains to anchor a ship, but he was conscious and surprisingly cooperative. Why do you heal me? He asked as she examined his wounded knee. I am your enemy. Dr. No looked up from her instruments. She had been working for 16 hours straight, treating both human and alien wounded without distinction. Her hands were steady, but her voice carried the exhaustion of someone who had seen too much suffering in one day. Because you're hurt, she said simply. That's what doctors do. We fix things, but I would have killed you, all of you. We came here to destroy everything. I know. Dr. No prepared a local anesthetic, but you didn't. And now you're hurt, so I'm going to fix your knee. Thakvar stared at her with alien eyes that were slowly beginning to understand something fundamental about these humans. They weren't just warriors. They were something else entirely. Something he had never encountered in a lifetime of conquest and destruction. Captain Yang Kyung-ho was overseeing the final cleanup operations from his command post in the captured Vraktar command center. His artillery teams had switched from destruction to construction, using their precision targeting systems to clear debris and create safe passages for civilian evacuation. Sir, his communications officer reported, we're getting signals from other systems. Looks like word is spreading about what happened here. What kind of signals? Mixed. Some species are sending congratulations. Others are demanding to know who we are and what we're doing in their galaxy. And a few? The officer paused. A few are asking if we're available for hire. Captain Yang nodded. It was what he had expected. News of the battle would spread quickly, and the galaxy's response would be predictable. Some would be grateful, some would be afraid, and some would see opportunity. What's our official response? Admiral Park says to refer all inquiries to Earth Command. We're just following orders. On the planet's surface, Major Lim Hae-wan was working with Kethmori engineers to restore basic infrastructure to the damaged cities. Her teams moved with the efficiency of people who had rebuilt entire continents. After natural disasters, the power grid here is completely different from ours, she explained to her human assistants while a group of alien engineers watched in fascination. But the principles are the same. Electricity is electricity no matter what planet you're on. One of the Kethmori engineers, a tall creature with crystalline features, approached hesitantly. Excuse me, but how do you know so much about our technology? We've never met your species before. Major Lim looked up from the power coupling she was repairing. We've been listening to your broadcast for about 40 years. Picked up a lot from your educational programs, she smiled. Your children's shows are particularly informative. The alien engineer stared at her in amazement. You learned our technology from children's programs? Kids' shows have to explain things simply, Major Lim replied. Makes them perfect for reverse engineering. Up in orbit, Admiral Park was dealing with a more complex problem. The galactic powers that had refused to help the Kethmori were now demanding explanations for humanity's intervention. The Alteran Federation's representative appeared on her view screen with the arrogance of someone used to being the most powerful voice in any conversation. Admiral Park, you have violated galactic sovereignty laws by intervening in this conflict without authorization. Park studied the alien diplomat with the expression she usually reserved for particularly stupid pirates. Authorization from who? From the Galactic Council, of course. All military interventions must be approved by... We're not members of your council, Park interrupted. We never signed your treaties. We never agreed to your laws. As far as we're concerned, you're just another group of aliens with opinions. The diplomat's face changed color, which Park assumed indicated anger or shock. You cannot simply ignore galactic law. Watch us, Park replied, and cut the connection. Wing Commander Yoon was leading the final patrol sweep of the system when her sensors detected something interesting. A small cluster of ships was approaching from deep space. Not Vraktar, but something else entirely. Unknown vessels. This is Commander Yoon of the Terran Fleet. Identify yourselves and state your intentions. The response came in heavily accented but understandable human language. Commander Yoon, this is Captain Veltana of the Rigelian Free Company. We came as soon as we heard. Are there any Vraktar left for us to fight? Yoon checked her tactical display. The approaching ships were small, fast, and heavily armed. Their design was unfamiliar, but their intent was clear. They were warriors coming to join a battle that was already over. I'm afraid you're too late, Captain. The Vraktar are either dead, captured, or running away. There was a pause, then laughter from the alien ship. Damn, we always miss the good fights. Maybe next time? Maybe, Yoon agreed. She was beginning to understand that humanity wasn't the only species in the galaxy that knew how to fight. They were just the only one that had shown up when it mattered. As the human fleet prepared to depart the Kethmori system, Ambassador Velthara stood in her damaged office and watched the alien ships that had saved her people. She still couldn't quite believe what had happened. In less than 72 hours, these humans had accomplished what the entire galactic community had declared impossible. How do we thank them? She asked High Council Leader Mordain. The old politician was reading reports from across the galaxy. The news of humanity's victory was spreading quickly, and the reactions were as varied as the species themselves. I don't think they want thanks, he replied. I think they just want to go home. But Velthara knew that wasn't entirely true. The humans had left behind more than just a military victory. They had left behind a message, one that every species in the galaxy would have to consider. Somewhere in the darkness between the stars, there was a world full of creatures who would answer when others called for help. They wouldn't ask for payment or demand tribute. They wouldn't negotiate or hesitate or form committees to study the problem.